Good evening from the University for Continuing Education, Danube University, Krems, to the Danube Salon, international and regional cooperation as an instrument of safeguarding peace in Europe. My name is Sebastian Schäffer, and I am the Managing Director of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, and I have the honor to moderate again this Danube Salon that deals with a very important topic. Together with, once again, renowned experts, we will discuss international cooperation and its contribution to peace. Current geopolitical issues will be debated, and the role of the regions will be illustrated. Starting from cross-border activities up to internationally operating networks in the Danube region, the different activities will be highlighted, as well as international understanding is emphasized. After decades of supposed stability, the developments of recent months show that the foundations are very fragile when it comes to peace in Europe. All the more important are institutions that are dedicated to international friendship and thus maintain a good basis for dialogue and contacts in the respective regions. Friendships built up in these times of peace are now relevant to support talks and discuss to find solutions in times of crisis. And for this, I would like to introduce our speakers and panelists and guests of honor of this evening. First and foremost, of course, the President of the Europa-Forum Wachau and Minister of Housing, Labor and International Relations in the government of Lower Austria, Martin Eichtinger. We have with us the Deputy County Commissioner of the region Vysocina, Hajnová. Simon Ortner, who is the Head of Department of International and European Affairs and also the Secretary General of the AG Donauländer. Christian Spahr, the Secretary General of the Assembly of European Regions. Iryna Izarova from the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv and currently at the Department for Legal Studies and International Relations at the Danube University in Krems. Ivanka Popović, the Vice President of the Danube Rectors Conference from the University of Belgrade. And Claudia Crawford, Head of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation International Office in Austria Multilateral Dialogue. I would, of course, also especially like to welcome our host, the Rector of the University for Continuing Education and current Chairman ad interim of IDM, Friedrich Faulhammer. And last but not least, of course, I like to welcome very much all the excellencies from the various embassies that joined us today. And to start us right off, I would like to ask Landesrat Eichtinger to the stage to give us some brief introductory words.
Vice Governor Hajnová, Secretary General Christian Spahr, Vice President Ivanka Popović, Ms. Claudia Crawford, former Federal Minister, Ms. Dr. Iryna Izarova, Rector Faulhammer, Managing Director Schäffer, ladies and gentlemen. Last year, during our Danube Salon, we were able to celebrate 10 years of the European Union strategy for the Danube region. And it's a real pleasure that this year we can again celebrate an anniversary, and again a 10th anniversary, the anniversary of the European region Danube-Moldova. The EDM, the European Danube-Moldova region, EDM, was founded in Linz as a trilateral working group on June 30th, 2012, so almost exactly 10 years ago to this very day. To this region we have 7 member regions. two from Germany, Lower Bavaria and Upper Palatinate, the Czech districts and provinces of Pilsen, South Bohemia and Vysocina, and from the Austrian side, Upper Austria and Lower Austria's Most- und Waldviertel. They are all members of EDM. The EDM has developed quite vividly over the last years, and it aims to contribute significantly to the further development of the whole region, as well as to the implementation of the European idea of a closer cooperation of regions, promoting the cooperation among its members. Since 2019, the EDM has been dedicated to a new midterm strategy. And the motto of this strategy is EDM Space for Society 4.0, with the subtopics Industry 4.0, Health and Tourism. In addition, various language programs will continue to operate in order to help break down boundaries, language barriers, and bring the border regions closer together. Why am I talking about EDM at the beginning of my speech? Because Lower Austria is currently holding the chairmanship of the EDM, and the EDM has become very important to us in our region. I just mentioned the core topics of our cooperation, but to us in Lower Austria, and I've talked about it already over the last days, very important is the cross-border cooperation in the field of healthcare. And we have been quite successful in cooperating in this field. We have been acknowledged by the WHO, the World Health Organization, as a best practice example for cross-border cooperation in the healthcare field. We have a joint European cross-border, the first ever cross-border healthcare center in the city of Gmünd, České Velenice, and we have several very important cooperations between hospitals and recently also elderly care homes in the framework of the European Union. Historically, this area of EDM has been hit hard by the two world wars, and it was an area where there was tremendous suffering and which later on caused quite some mistrust between the neighbors. And especially during the period of the Cold War, this distrust had a very strong impact on the region. Of course, Lower Austria was, like everybody else, we were extremely fortunate that in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, the Iron Curtain came down, and we were able to establish a closer cooperation between the regions. Nowadays, our region, EDM, we think, is a pioneer for cross-border cooperation in the European Union. Apart from the EDM, there are, as you know, other fora of close cooperation in the Danube region. And I would just like to mention the working community of Danube regions, where Lower Austria was among the founding members. And interestingly enough, it's of course the whole stretch of the Danube River, with one member also being in today's Ukraine, the region of Odessa. So this region will also offer a very good, in the future, a very important forum for closer cooperation. It is my firm belief that this cooperation in the framework of the EDM, of the Working Group of Danube Regions, but also, of course, in the European Union strategy for the Danube region, are the best means to contribute to an ever closer cooperation, understanding, and to many, many joint projects and initiatives. As you have seen, there is I would say there are several layers of cooperation among the Danube regions. They work very closely in fields like tourism, like culture, very importantly, also in the field of the economy and business, where there is still a lack of commitment for the whole area of the Danube region is certainly the political commitment for joint initiatives along the Danube River. And I would very much hope that over the next years, and particularly also next year, when Austria is going to be the chair of the European Union strategy for the Danube region, that there will be a new impulse for such a political commitment for the Danube region. Having said this, I would like to first of all apologize because I have to substitute for our governor at the meeting that I will be leaving you right now. But I wish you a very interesting stock-taking of what is going on in the Danube region. I think yesterday's and today's decisions in Brussels at the European Council are a further indication that this cooperation in the region is of utmost importance to the whole of the European Union. And this is why I think you have ample food for thought and food for discussion because of these decisions that we have witnessed yesterday and today. I wish you an interesting evening session, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin Eichtinger, for setting the stage for this Danube Salon. And I would now like to welcome to the stage Hana, Hajnová. Please, a round of applause. We will stand. We will stand. Yeah. And oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yes. So
this will be better.
Wonderful. Welcome to the stage. Before we start, when you follow the Europa-Forum Wachau, you know that we do that very interactively, and we use the Mentimeter to bring you into the discussion. And with Mentimeter, we ask you questions from time to time, and we will do so also today. If you're in the room, you can use the QR code that's on your table with your smartphone, or if you join us online, you could also go to the browser and type in www.menti.com and enter the code 95177757, and you will have the possibility later to ask questions. And now, to start off our Danube Salon, we would like to know, which institutions do you believe are crucial to provide peace in Europe?
I'm not sure if we can call them institution, because if anybody could make a peace, that we are the people. If we need to create some institution, we could create it. But the most important movement is always made by people. So you and me, we can do it, or we can make it together in a region such as EDM is.
When we see what the people in the room and also joining us online say, we see now appearing this word cloud where we see, of course, the usual suspects, probably NATO, EU. There's also IDM. Mm-hmm. Close.
I like it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and we have interesting other institutions like UEFA, which I have probably wouldn't have expected. Well, in any case, the EDM is also one of these institutions, I would say, that is important to safeguard peace in Europe, and we heard already a little bit about the role that this region played. And I would like to start with the slogan of the European region, Danube, Moldova, which is together, cross-border, 3 countries, 2 languages, 1 region. And can you tell us more about the challenges and the achievements over the last decade?
It will be my pleasure. Because as Martin, I think, already mentioned, on the 30th of June, there is a 10-year anniversary of the Signature Act of the European region, Moldova. And I'm really glad that I could be a part of its story. I started my story in the EDM 2 years before, and in spite of the pandemic, which strongly affected the last 2 years, I have to say one thing. The EDM is a very inspirative area, And also, it's a place where the new approaches and tools are making our lives better. I hear some more help because what I like on the regional cooperation is the dialogue, and that we are trying to solve the all nowadays challenges together. And we are cooperating in 6 main topics. Some of them were already mentioned by Martin Eichtinger. The one is the healthcare, then the tourist industry, the people and society, and also the cooperation between universities, the industry for zero, and energy and mobility. And in all these topics, many successful projects were already realized. You can see a few of them because the projects are very ranged. From cookbooks, tourist guides you can take in the lobby of this conference hall, to the joint projects or implementation of new technologies like telematics in medicine are. So a lot of inspirative projects, and I'm really looking forward to next years without the pandemic, what we will create next.
Thank you very much. There is already a lot of cross-border cooperation that has been going on, not only in this region, but especially very much interesting parts that are very relevant, and where you mentioned the pandemic have painfully seen how quickly these achievements are also hampered. There's other, so to say, events that are bringing history some sort of back to the region. Not your region, but another region in the Danube region. And this return of history with great power ambitions and imperialistic aspirations is something that the EDM has contributed to overcome. And from your perspective, how has this been established? And additionally, what prerequisites for possible reconciliation can regional cooperation institutions fulfill, respectively?
Yes, that's a very huge question. I try to answer it shortly, because one of the tools is the cooperation. As Martin Eichtinger already mentioned, that's the added value for the regions on the Danube River. And I think the main condition which we created is that we left our particular national interests behind, and that we are keeping the European values, the common European values of democracy, which are the legal state, civil liberties, human rights, the free market, the free competition, not only in business but also in politics. And that's what's matter. When we can talk to each other, then we can together find the solutions to our troubles and make tools and approaches, they bring these solutions to our nowadays lives. That's what could help, or what we can recommend to other regions in Europe to do. Just talk and cooperate, not war. Please.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I think this deserves a round of applause.
Thank you.
Hajnová, we will continue the dialogue, and hopefully also in the future we'll be able to talk to other regions and not disconnect completely. Thank you very much for setting such a good example and presenting to us a little bit the region Danube-Moldau. I think a round of applause to accompany Hajnová from the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wish you a nice evening.
Now, with the region Danube-Moldova, Donau-Moldau, it has a namesake, and not so much to do with the country that has gotten the candidate status yesterday, a country that is also very dear to me, as I've been working a lot there, but to better understand what the European region of Danube-Moldova is, we will watch the new image film that was created to get a better idea. So please roll the movie. what a beautiful region that is. And now we would like to come to the whole Europe as a region. But before we talk about a study that has been done by the Assembly of the European Regions, we will do a little study ourselves. And for this, I would like to ask you again to scan the QR code, or if you're already logged in your browser at menti.com, type in the code, and the code again is 95177757. And the question we asked this time, and you will have to choose from a possibility of answers because it mirrors the survey that has been done. And the question is, in which areas does your region most urgently need progress? The possibilities to answer are economic development and jobs, or healthcare, or perspectives for the youth, education, or environment and climate transition. And there's also, of course, the possibility to say all 5 pillars are equally important. We see already the results coming in. Not a lot of young people in the room, if I scan it a little bit. There they come, okay. Well, we can see that with such a impression of this beauty of the region, that of course the protection of the environment in this region is something that we should really strive for, and it seems to be the consensus with a clear front runner here in the room, but also from the ones that join us online. If this is also the result, and many things more will be brought to us by Christian Spahr, and a big round of applause while he is coming on stage. Thank you very much for coming, and yes, we are very much looking forward to hear your results.
Many thanks, Sebastian Schäffer. Many thanks to you and also Martin Eichtinger for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be personally on site this year in this very nice region, by the way, also one of the most active member regions of the Assembly of European Regions. What I like about the Europa-Forum Wachau is that it has the function of a think tank, bringing new ideas also from a regional perspective. And I think also Austria is good at building political bridges in different directions of Europe. We saw that in the presentation of the Danube region cooperation. And this is something that connects us, the AER and the Europa-Forum Wachau, because the AER does not include only EU members, also Ukraine, Western Balkans, and other neighbors of the European Union. Last week, we had a big AER online conference on coordinating aid to Ukraine, and Minister Dr. Martin Eichtinger was one of the speakers. And today it will be my pleasure to prepare the ground for this debate with some findings from a representative opinion poll on regional democracy and Europe that we did last year. About the methodology, a few words. We polled in 6 EU countries in different geographical regions with a combined population of more than 60% of the EU represented in this opinion poll, so it is a good indicator for our debate. We queried Germany, France, Italy, Poland, Romania, and Sweden, plus Ukraine. And I will always mention when results are either EU only or Ukraine is included. The first results have been presented in Brussels in October last year, and here is a special compilation for today's session in view of the debate that we will have. As a regional organization, it is exciting for us to see how people's identities overlap, and we want to start with this topic, European identity. We specifically asked about the identity as a citizen, not ethnicity or culture. And there were 10 possible answers to this question, including multiple answers. We offered very differentiated options, so the individual percentages are not very high, as you see. But the key message is that almost on the same level are the EU identity and the nation state in these 6 countries that we polled. But the city is also a relevant variable. And then let's have a look at Eastern Europe. You have heard about the conference on the future of Europe that recently ended. In this context, we asked whether neighbors like Serbia or Ukraine need to be included in the debate on the future of Europe. And that was before the new war of aggression against Ukraine. Now the values would maybe or most certainly be higher. Even then, every second person in the EU or in the EU countries we polled was in favor of including Eastern Europe in these debates. Among the EU countries that have been surveyed, the Poles were the most in favor, the French at the least. And the Ukrainians themselves demand this inclusion in the debate the most, a demand that we as an organization very strongly support. And let me briefly mention that as AER we have also published a clear statement that Ukraine is entitled to its full state sovereignty. As a pan-European association, we do not want to teach lessons to Ukraine about compromises. On the contrary, it deserves the growing support of us all. Let us have a look at regional needs, and this matches the Mentimeter that has been put up by Sebastian Schäffer. Some of the regional priorities of the citizens. Just a few months ago, these were the top concerns of local people in their regions. Above all, economic prospects, health and education. Not so much as here in the room, the environment. But we believe that the results that we have on this slide are under the impression, very much under the impression of the COVID pandemic. That the COVID pandemic provided for an uncertainty of people, especially in economic matters. Now, a quick glance at the young generation. We asked the young people between 18 and 24 about their priorities. The priorities are not very much different, but still different, because obviously they care most about their own perspectives. Also education and healthcare are relevant topics, economic development, and more than others, they ask also the question of social balance. Now another slide about how people see the quality of life in their region in 10 years from now. And that is a slide that could look well different after the war began in February. Nevertheless, I would like to show it. Despite the pandemic that started 2 years ago, a relative majority of people believe or have believed that the quality of life in their region will continue to rise over the next 10 years. Young people even answer particularly optimistically. And one reason why optimism is quite high at the regional level may also be that trust in politics is higher at the regional level. According to our survey, trust in regional and local governments is highest, certainly because politics is most tangible at the regional and local level for people in their daily lives. The EU enjoys nearly as much trust, and regional and national governments enjoy somewhat less trust. This is not representative for each individual EU country, but the basic message is confirmed by similar studies, for example, by the Committee of the Regions. For us, this also means that regional decision makers need to be more involved in policy making at national and EU level, no matter whether it's about EU structural funds or aid for Ukraine, because the regional councillors and mayors are closest to the citizens. And one last slide from our survey, coming back to the conference on the future of Europe that just ended. What people hoped, okay, I think the presentation doesn't go further here. Very good. We asked the question, which of these objectives should the Conference on the Future of Europe achieve? There were more options than these three, but these were the most popular answers. And it is very clear that in a modern Europe, people are not only interested in being able to speak their mind, they also want to be part of the decision-making process beyond elections. And we had a very exciting conference 2 weeks ago with ENOP, the umbrella organization of political foundations in Europe, on sustainable methods of using citizen input in decision-making, and to see what successful regional and national approaches there are. We also discussed this with Martin Eichtinger a week ago in Brussels. There are good examples here from Lower Austria, notably the European councillors. This interactive, dialogue-based part of our democracy is also an important element in defending our political model and our way of life in the European Union against attacks from outside. Many thanks for your attention. I wish you a good debate.
Thank you very, very much for this presentation. I'll give you the microphone because after such a high amount of very interesting data, of course, I'm very curious about some other things that maybe you have found out. Because, I mean, you mentioned you did the survey in EU member states, but also in Ukraine. And as this overall motto of the Danube Salon, of course, also revolves around safeguarding peace in Europe. And as we know, painfully, that there is not peace in Europe and that in Ukraine there is a war going on. I was wondering what an institution like the Assembly of the European Regions is actually able to contribute to alleviate the situation in the region, but also especially here with regards to Ukraine.
Many thanks for this question. Last week we had an online coordination meeting. It was more like a webinar. It was open to the public to see how regions can help Ukrainian regions. EU regions can help Ukrainian regions. And there are very different examples from our AER member regions. For instance, in Sweden, the region where the country where our president comes from, he's here, Magnus Berntsson, from Västra Götaland in Sweden. There, the region basically contributed into a national facility to send aid, humanitarian aid to Ukraine. In the French region of Grand Est, where our Vice President Christian Debève comes from, he will speak tomorrow, the region itself coordinated different initiatives from municipalities. So there are different models of collecting aid for Ukraine. There are also regional partnerships, specifically between AER member regions and Ukrainian regions. And of course, there are European platforms with whom we cooperate, with the Committee of the Regions, with the Council of Europe, who have their own websites. And we all sit together, and we don't want to engage in a competition, but we want to combine our efforts. And I believe, and this is also something that our Ukrainian member regions say, that city partnerships and regional partnerships help a lot in this effort. And of course, these direct contacts help to help them to say what they need most, and help those who want to help to know what is actually needed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. One more time, thank you very much also for the presentation of the study. A big round of applause.
Many thanks. My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. May I accompany you off the stage? You can keep the microphone and just leave it somewhere there. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And now we will continue this debate with our panel discussion. And for this, I would like to ask to the stage Iryna Izarova, Ivanka Popović, and Claudia Crawford. Also nice. That's okay. That's okay. Come from this way. It's also nice. Why not? Why not? Wonderful. Thank you. You have all your microphones? Yeah, careful. I did the same. I was trying it out before, so I was warned. Sorry. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I think it's a wonderful possibility to continue the discussion in this setup, because we do not want to talk only about the questions, but also with people that are from regions and working there and have the experience there. And therefore, I would like to start off with Ira, with your professional as well as personal experience of disputes and their effective resolution. Is the rule of law at a regional level actually something that institutions can help to shape it?
Thank you very much for this question, and I was very impressed by the presentation. Thank you very much for including Ukraine in this pool. That means a lot for all of us. As a lawyer and professor of university, I can just say that the rule of law is a fundamental for international peace, for political stability, for security. The United Nations made this principle one of the leading pillars. At a regional level, European Convention of Human Rights makes the rule of law one of the most important principles. European Court of Human Rights implemented this principle through this decision. Therefore, it was very important to know that the state aggressor suspended the recognition of judgments of this court. So it means the paramount importance of these judgments for the rule of law development. I think this is a challenge for all of us here in Europe. Anyway, with the institutions and developing our joint decision, we can reshape this principle of rule of law and continue in this toward direction of sustainability, of resiliency, keeping in mind that all the institutions should be peace and strong. I would add also that, as you already mentioned, my area of expertise is civil procedure and conflict resolution. Prevention of conflicts should draw more attention in future for our future perspective development.
Thank you so much. And I would like to continue with Ivanka. Some seem to have forgotten that there was a war in Europe in the 1990s. And following the breakup of Yugoslavia, do you see any parallels to the situation then? And would you comment on the possibility for transitional justice, which is a process that is actually still ongoing on the Western Balkans, and maybe even if you want to comment on the rather disappointing result of the EU Western Balkan Summit yesterday and how they probably did not contribute to transitional justice in Europe?
I'm very glad to be here. These are very tough questions that you are raising. But of course, the parallel is that these are tragic events for Europe and I think the whole world. The Balkans are still recovering from the conflicts, and Ukraine has, I think, very many challenges ahead of it. And what I can say is that the senseless loss of life and devastation is so overwhelming that to overcome the consequences of this is really something that will take decades, and without the help and solidarity of Europe, it's impossible for this to happen. And as far as these legal proceedings are concerned, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just speaking as an interested citizen. I can say that also I think the need for international courts is very strong. But on the other hand, what we have seen that actually many countries have somehow minimized the effects of the court rulings by protecting and almost sometimes championing the people who were put to trial. So therefore, I think somehow some of the point was lost of why having the court cases at all. But still, I would persevere and I would not stop, because at one point it will sink in why this is so important. As far as what came out of the summit, I could only say that, of course, the first step is to become a country candidate, on which I congratulate both Ukraine and Moldova. But the process is long, painful for both sides, I think. And the negotiations are such that they may be understood by politicians, but often not by the population. And in that respect, many parts of the population in the Western Balkans are, I think, not fully understanding the process and therefore tiring of it. And this will make damage, and some aspects of the disappointments of what has happened to Northern Macedonia and Albania in the initiation of the negotiations was also a blow that had some people becoming more and more skeptical. So I think we have a long way to go, but the most important aspect for me is building trust. And I was very impressed by the results you presented and the fact that in some Western European countries there is such a doubt or lack of need to have also the knowledge of the opinion of peoples in other parts of Europe is something that also reflects on the situation that we have. So I think we all have to grow and learn, and I think the country candidates have a strong incentive to join, but I think solidarity also needs to be a relevant point that we need to all of us look at in this particular point in our history, because just one last point I would like to make. As someone who is looking at the situation that we had in the Balkans, where it was a very brutal decomposition and deconstruction of a country, and whether it had to go that way is debatable. But on the other hand, what's happening is also a very brutal invasion. It means what will be the time frame where we expect what were the real borders. So I don't want to make any parallels, so I will make one that probably won't offend anyone. Say, should we go back to the Roman Empire and say this was, okay, this is the map of Europe and that one we will follow? And of course we can bring it up a few centuries and discuss. So I think we must accept the will of nations and their right to self-determination. So, and we can only do this together through tolerance and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivanka. I would like to follow up on the questions of the trials and briefly go back to Iryna, because these trials for war crimes are not yet on an international stage, but have already happened in Ukraine. And of course, undoubtedly, war crimes have been committed there, but now that they already have been held and there have already been sentences, what role do such trials actually play, and do they safeguard the rule of law? Does this actually serve transitional justice from your point of view?
Yeah, it's also a very important question for ordinary people and for state. Yeah. The first trial held in May in Kyiv. That was related to murdering of an old man who were driving on the bicycle through his own house without any weapon, just calling his mobile phone. So I would like to draw your attention not to the particular trial, but to the very sense of justice. Justice should prevail. It's very important from the time of Roman Empire and until now, people believe in truth and in justice. So a fair trial should happen with all criminals who committed crimes in Ukraine and in every country, in every region of our world. There should be no heaven for criminals. And we have a great example of universal jurisdiction. In Germany, in January this year, the verdict was announced in case of Syrian criminal, a person who committed crimes in Syria. And then, after that happened, he moved with his family to Germany. So I would like just to reiterate that justice should be not only performed just like show or just for to show something. It should be the result of prosecution of crimes, because without trials, a fair trial, there will be no crimes at all. And we have to be aware about this is a very important thing to rebuild peace after justice prevails.
Thank you so much, Iryna. Now I would like to go to Claudia with your experience as a minister in Germany, but also as a representative of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, where you have been, amongst others, in Belgrade and also in Moscow. You have a broad insight into the topics that have been discussed not only in the study presented, but what we've heard from the previous two speakers with regards to what is happening in the countries and what has happened in these countries. What is your observation?
First of all, also thank you from my side for having me and for bringing up this discussion on what can international and regional cooperation achieve in peacekeeping and supporting our countries of a fruitful future. I started my work with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Belgrade, and my impression when I came to Russia was it was a good starting point to understand Russia or what's going on in Russia, because there were some similarities in the development. Also to understand the situation of the people in these countries, so Serbia and Russia, they all have their own narrative. And to break with this narrative, this is a very complicated thing, but I believe for this regional cooperation can really make a difference. When I worked in Belgrade, my impression was there is not so much dialogue between Serbia and Bosnia and Croatia. They were rather looking at their own. And everybody had its own narrative. And I also was, of course, responsible for Kosovo and Montenegro, and it was the same. And regional cooperation may help to break the stereotype, to what you have just said, create dialogue, which helps to rethink their own stereotypes. I also think with this cooperation from other countries, we can achieve also very practical things in these countries. So just to mention a few of these, this is dialogue, which is a foundation for building trust, development trust, but also education in the sense of democratic education, political education, not only school education. What I also found very important of my work, or the work of other organizations who work there, for example, also the other political foundations from Germany, there are more than also only Konrad Adenauer Foundation, was to exchange experiences. For example, from Germany, the experiences of committed so huge crime in the Second World War with the Holocaust helped to understand how to reconcile, what to do to reconcile together with nations who were hating each other for centuries. So for me, it was always an important topic in the Balkans to talk about reconciliation, how it can be achieved, which would be, in my point of view, very important to bring a sustainable peace. This is a starting point. And if we don't start with reconciliation in the Balkans, it will be very difficult really to have a regional integration in the Balkans. Now it's too complicated and too early, I guess, to talk about reconciliation in the case of Ukraine. There is war going on. In the future, it will become a very important topic and a very difficult one. And so to support and to give examples is important help, and also very practical help. Supporting, delivering materials, those kind of things. So cooperation gives very important things for those countries. What is difficult is really to change narratives, what I said, but also habits, beliefs. This is something inside of the societies has to happen. So the people by themselves are in place. They have to work on it to overcome their own problems and struggles and hostilities. This to bring from outside is very difficult. And I experienced this in the Balkan, I experienced this in Russia. And there are some of the topics which makes sometimes very clear. When I started in Belgrade, we were asked to do some projects on how to fight corruption. And one colleague of mine said to me, and I think probably he's right, he said, Claudia, this is not a question of knowledge. This is a question of political will. And if there is no political will, you can do so many projects and create so many institutions, it will not work. And I think this is one of a very important point in this stage, that you have to support societies to demand on their politicians to bring this political will up. And this is what I see in Ukraine, which is really impressive and serves as a fantastic example. You had 2004, the Orange Revolution, where the people said, this was not a fair election and we will not let you go with this flawed election. In 2013, the second time, this were the people who demanded the president, Yanukovych, please, you had to sign. We will not accept that you don't sign. So there is a real development of civic society. And this is really a great asset Ukraine has. Maybe even more than some other regional countries, where people really see themselves as we are the ones who ask for democracy, for rights, for rule of laws, for transparency, anti-corruption measurements. And therefore, yes, the people themselves can do a lot, and we have wonderful examples for this, and we have to support this.
Thank you very much. I would even add that the people in Ukraine fought for their independence in a first, now of course with weapons, but in the concrete revolution in 1991, they had the first independence fight that they won. To add to this, I would like to go not to education that Claudia mentioned, but to higher education, which is of course also very important. The war in Ukraine has also shaped the image of academics, and when you are, with all the experiences that you have as a vice president of the Danube Rectors Conference, but also as a member of the board of the European University Association, where do you draw the line between activism and professionalism, and how have institutions of higher education actually responded to this war?
I think institutions of higher education have been really very much on the ball and responded immediately because there are such strong ties between individual institutions. There are personal ties, and many of these some were institutional actions, some were individual ad hoc actions where people got into cars and just did things to help. And of course, the main way that universities can help is through this type of solidarity. There has also been a lot of support for those Ukrainian students that would need some kind of financial assistance, although it's clear that the position of Ukrainian students is very different because of the men and the women being in a different position. Some will be leaving Ukraine, some will be staying, some will be studying parts of Ukraine that have been destroyed, so they have to be dislocated. I mean, the complexities and the logistics are incredible, and for that purpose, the European University Association has set up a task force that would be like a think tank that would help the rebuilding of the higher education system in Ukraine after hostilities cease. And I see this as the ultimate form of solidarity, where together with our Ukrainian colleagues, representatives of universities from all over Europe will try to find ways and also using some experiences from the post-war situation in the Western Balkans, how to rebuild. Of course, each nation and each country has a different situation, so it cannot be a copy-paste, but for certain, there will be one track where there has to be a lot of money invested in the rebuilding, simply to replace destroyed buildings, equipments, laboratories. But there's one thing that's dealing with developing human resources and providing the networks that will enable that we have a fast recovery of the Ukrainian higher education system, because only educated people, not just in Ukraine, but all over the world, are those that will be the drivers of change. And one very important aspect in all of this is that will the consequences of the war in Ukraine increase the brain drain? This is something that we witnessed in the Western Balkans, that the main brain drain was massive, not only with highly educated people, but other categories of the population. So these are some of the things that we have never recovered from in the Western Balkans, and it's a continuing trend for various reasons. So I think this is also a very dangerous situation for Ukraine, because it's one aspect that, of course, there's no question that one loves one's own country and wants to help it, but if there are not sufficient conditions to maintain a lifestyle, then or just basic living, things become very, very complicated. So we cannot have a support system from other universities that would attract the talent from Ukraine. This has to be avoided at all costs. And so I think this task force, and I'm sure many other mechanisms that will be set up, will try to maintain this balance of support and self-help, which is, I think, the key. So in the end, like what we talked about before, there has to be mutual respect, understanding, and to have a good ear to work together with our Ukrainian colleagues to come to the best possible solution and future for Ukraine, because higher education will be the key, I'm sure, for the development of the country, not only in the sense of rebuilding in a material sense, but also in a societal and political sense, that this is the future of the country that will be the future leaders. So I hope that the solidarity will endure, because, of course, unfortunately, when, I also know this from the Balkans, when the conflicts take a long time, we all are somehow getting fatigue of these news, and life goes on with other things, and we must not let this fatigue set in. We must keep on going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivanka. I have one last question for Claudia before we open up for the room. So you can ask questions here, just raise your hand. But you can also join us when you watch online and have a question. I mention again menti.com/. stay just locked in until the end, because I will have also one last poll question at the very end, but we are not there yet. So ask your question in Menti. It will be transferred to my screen here, and then we will have the possibility to ask that question. But as I said before we do that, Claudia, with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, you work at the intersection of politics and policy advice. Which role, would you say, do actors like your foundation play in mediating between citizens, academia, and also policymakers? Because what we've heard now is that there is certainly a lot of need and a lot of lessons that we should have learned. There are precedents. How can institutions like yours contribute to that?
Contributing to bring together politicians and civil society, there is a lot possible for the kind of our institution to bring those together, but civil society in this sense means already active people. For example, NGOs, groups who are interested on a topic and approach us and ask us for doing something together. And with academia, it's also very easy to cooperate, to approach them and combine and connect politicians, academia, NGOs. I have to be modest. The population as such, I mean, in Moscow I had 13 staff members, in Belgrade I had 9 staff members, and if you look at the population, I can't claim that we really have influence in a wide range of the population. There might some topics where you can get public attention. For example, Montenegro was always great. With every event we did, we were in the main news in the evening. I mean, this is fantastic, but this is a very small country, and that it's easier to get attraction and to be visible. But what I think is our main topic is really to cooperate with politicians and have political dialogue. Because if you look how usually regional cooperation, international cooperation is, or the development cooperation, this goes very often from government to government. And also in the NGO area, you have very good relationship and working together, you have good structures. What in my experience is not so good developed to really take care of all parliamentary institutions, of all democratic institutions. So governments get support. A bit maybe the justice system, because we have institutions for this like Europa-Rat and European Council and other organizations, and you have structures in this field. With the parliament is not so easygoing. And if you discuss with people what is important for them, they tell you democracy, freedom, this is all important. But if it comes to politics, to parties, to politicians, so you immediately get another outcome. So there is not a lot of enthusiasm. And you can understand, because you can see in different countries the political systems are not very inviting. So, and we try to support especially young people, at least to become a political thinker, to understand what's going on, what decision-making process means, how much time it needs, why you need political competition, so these kind of things. So this is a really educational process, and it's the same with the parliaments. So sometimes I said to parliamentarians, you have power in a democratic system. And if you don't have power, then look at your system. Maybe there is something not really okay. So this is our understanding, especially with the political foundations from Germany who want to help building democracies, and therefore you need democratic institutions and parliaments and parties, politicians, they belong to it. And in this intersection, I guess we can do a lot. We have political dialogues. We invite them also to Germany or to Austria to just get an impression, to exchange their experiences with parliamentarians in Germany or with politicians as a whole, also party members. And this is very focused. We have specific target groups in this sense. And I think we really have add value to the whole thing of international cooperation.
Thank you. I can imagine that it helps that you've also seen that side in government and in parliament to understand where you maybe need to twist and tweak some things. Yeah? So now I would open up the floor. If I see a question here, please step into the light. Yes, but for our audience joining online, it helps to... Thank you. Wonderful. The light is here, I think.
Thanks. My name is
please, introduce yourself and address the question to a certain person or the whole panel.
Yeah. My name is Reinhard Klutschig. I'm working for the Pan-European Union here in Austria. And I have one question to Professor Popović. As you mentioned, the brain drain, and it's still going on. Is it going on because of the war, or is it going on because because there is no perspective for the people in the countries? Just to compare it, we are putting a lot of money into this region, but without any kind of control what is done with this money. So to say it in simple words, we are feeding mafia structures with money, because for any corrupt politicians it makes sense not to make reforms, but by that taking perspective from people that have some kind of development in their countries in the region. And I have a second question to the lady from Ukraine. As in the title you have peacekeeping, I would like to ask you if you do see any chance for a peace now in this in this war, Russia against Ukraine, or do you expect that we will have a long ongoing war, maybe a partisan war or whatever it then will be?
Thank you very much. Ivanka, do you want to start?
Maybe I can start. Well, first of all, during the 90s, there was a lot of brain drain. Well, people left with the belief that they would come home. And then as they established themselves in other countries and their families, and as change was coming too slowly in their own countries, then, of course, some returned, but only a fraction of those who left. Then we had the early 2000s with the great expectations of coming closer to Europe. And I think there was a lot of hope at that time. And yes, European money started coming to Serbia. But I also have to say, you know how these projects work. As I'm not a politician, please excuse me for being so frank, but a lot of this money is going on European experts. So the money is staying in Europe, and some of it is staying in the Balkans, but some of it is staying in Serbia. But yes, that is fully correct. The European Union is the highest net benefactor to the Western Balkans. And this is something that the populations of the Western Balkans are not fully aware of, because the news are not made explicitly clear. So in these early 2000s, when somehow this change was not coming about as quickly as they expected, and there were some elections that brought about a shift to the right in a way that was not necessarily that the right will not bring about change, but maybe if it's a nationalistic right, then it gets a bit complicated. And people were losing their patience, because in spans of history, this is nothing. 30 years is nothing. But for one lifetime, it's not much too long, and you can't simply put your life on hold for your country to get itself together. So I think the reasons for leaving have been changing. So what we have now is first the consequences of the war, then maybe the first disenchantment of the slowness of the European accession. Now we have the next wave of disappointment, the European accession. And as we are losing these parts of the population, those that are staying do not have this critical mass of bringing about the change that you mentioned, that it has to come from inside. Of course it has to come from inside, the change. And now I think we're dangerously at a low level of the proactive population. So this is not at all an easy situation in which we find ourselves. So, but the fact is, people are leaving. And now we're almost coming to the point, it doesn't matter why they're leaving, we have to take very strong action. And of course, that for politicians is a tricky point, because they come to power with some rhetoric, and how they govern then is different. So, and this is sometimes, I think, difficult for many people in Western Europe to understand how things function. So I would, at the moment, say that the results of the summit, the EU Western Balkans summit, it would be very nice if this was a changing point, if somehow the dialogue could be different, where it was the mention of this discussion already, how to somehow have the population of the Western Balkans understand that there is some benefit to them with joining the EU, because this is slowly being lost. And if there is an understanding of the benefits, the tangible benefits that will be coming not in 20 years, but in a somehow acceptable time frame, then we could have a change. But it's not at all an easy job, because this vacuum that we actually had with the lack of sufficient presence of the European Union let other players be there, and they were probably more active. So as I said, I'm not a politician, but the situation on the ground is that it's really a day-to-day struggle for values. And I've been listening very carefully to the discussions also this morning at the Abbey. I think Europe, or European Union, maybe needs to rethink how it will be promoting the importance of its values, and how this will change life in the Western Balkans, because I think this message is not getting through. And I think we all have to be better, and better to promote, better to accept. So it's a two-way street, and I think it will take a long time. I am unfortunately not the optimist of this morning's panel. I think we are stuck in a limbo, and this will make the situation in Europe very complicated in the years to come. And so that's life, I suppose. It's never easy. So I didn't answer the question, but I have to say, systemic corruption is an issue that is not just an issue of the Western Balkans. It's a global issue. In countries that, like the Western Balkans have, the corruption is very easy to see, and it's naked in the way it's exposed. And while in other countries it's done at a very subtle level. But I think to believe that it's only a question of some parts of the world would be a fallacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivanka, also for what you mentioned before, because I think what we have not really understood is also the necessity, of course, to explain what the accession process actually means and how tiresome it is, and what candidate status means, not only to the countries and the societies that are applying, because I think they are much more aware of it than the ones who are already EU member. And we also need to, though, again, convince them that being an EU member is something beneficial, because, for instance, in Serbia, for the first time, below 50% believe that their country's future lies within the European Union. And I think this is a very challenging development, and we've done a very poor job. And I mean, Serbia has now been negotiating also already for 8 years, and with
This is this fatigue that I was mentioning, because the government, of course, is the go-between between the population and the European Union, and somehow the passing on of information seems not to be quite as efficient as one would hope it would be, and hopefully this could change.
Yeah. We have the second question to you, Ira, about the prospects for peace. But I would also add to this one of the questions that were asked on Menti, because when we look into the future, where we hopefully have very soon the possibility to get peace, a good question is also maybe to look back into the past and ask ourselves the question, has the West misjudged foreign policy in recent years or ignored the danger out of convenience? What would you say?
First of all, let me add a few words just briefly to the previous discussion, because I'm a good example of cooperation, effective cooperation of higher education institution, I would say, because I'm a co-head of the research project, bilateral research project, Ukrainian, Austrian, with University for Continuing Education, Krems, and I was very lucky to meet my colleagues from the Department of International Relations and Legal Studies. Here, Professor Radka and Dr. Lentner. Our friendship passed through both of challenges of recent years, through pandemic and through this war, and I receive all support here in Austria since the war in Ukraine began. I would say that for scholars right now there are no borders, because if we share our values of rule of law, of democracy, we support each other, and our further cooperation also built on project of access to justice for temporarily displaced Ukrainians. So, I mean, it gives us more opportunities in future. My university, Ukrainian University, Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, is one of the leading higher educational hub in Ukraine. Right now, my colleagues are welcomed in all of Europe and even the United States and Canada. And yeah, there are a lot of concerns and doubts about their coming back in Ukraine. Nevertheless, I would say each of us can find another state or second home, but we can't change our homeland anyway. So I can't imagine my colleagues who truly believe in academic integrity, in science. It's very, very specific area of human activity. They will cut ties with their homeland. According to peace, I would like to reiterate two of issues I said previously. So peace right now seems to me something very temporary, because just coming back to our history, we can see so many wars happened here in Europe. Even keeping this in mind, we are still developing. We keep strong in our faith and belief to rule of law and democracy and open society. Open society, I would say, is the most crucial thing. So the European Union actually is a result of this force. To some extent, this is one of the consequences of understanding how it's important to be union and keeping in solidarity with each other. So I would say that I can only believe in end of the war very soon, and I would in future I would keep more attention to prevent any other similar event here in Europe and everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, we already mentioned it's not the first war in Europe since the end of the Second World War. It's not even the first war in Ukraine, because it all started already in 2014.
You're absolutely right, and I would like also to add that Ukrainians we are fighting for our independence for centuries. Centuries. I don't want to jump deeply in our history, but we will keep fighting.
Claudia, maybe also to you, the question: has the West willfully or ignorantly ignored the prospects of war? Because the point that the country is, since 2014, fighting for its territorial integrity and independence, is something that seems to have been forgotten.
I think what we can say, that nobody could imagine that we will witness a war which provides us with pictures we would think back in the last century. So a kind of war in this scale, where you really feel reminded on the great wars in the last century, I really guess almost nobody could expect, or maybe there were few, honestly speaking. But that we witness more and more constraints in our relationship to Russia, or that we have a real problem with Russia, was visible for everybody when Crimea did happen with the annexation. For those who knew Russia a bit better, they were surprised that people then started to think, oh, we have a problem. Because it was clear long before that we have a problem. But probably for the West is difficult. You have to ask, who is the West? Just looking at Europe, we don't have the Western Europe countries or the EU countries who have a foreign policy which serves national interest. We have a foreign policy who has to serve 27 national interests. And the problem starts already there. And politicians, of course, first of all, they serve their own people and their own country. And you have differences in the situation of all EU member states. And this makes it very complicated that they can come to one voice in foreign policy. So it's not just a misjudging. We don't have the real structure Europe would need, or the European Union would need. That's why in the conference, The Future of Europe was also making the point we have to find better procedures to come to decision-making, to a decision. So anonymity, where everybody has to agree for foreign policy, for defense policy, probably for the future, is not the best idea. So we have really to change something. And what they also probably have not seen is what's going on in a country like Russia. We were living a long time from the situation from 1990, where we really hope we have a new world. Now we really grow together. And of course, there was the war in the Balkans, but as you already mentioned, we get fatigued very, very fast, and every country had to struggle to adjust to the new situation. The globalization really got started in that time. And there was, on both sides, Russia and European Union, or the West in this point, a huge disappointment. Because the West thought, okay, Russia now will develop as we develop and will become as we are. It's the same with the Balkans. We think you will become as we are. You have to become as we are. And Russia, and probably in your country, might be similar thing. We come together. That means the European Union has, of course, also to change and come closer to us, and then we find something new. So we build the European house in a new way. And this is probably a misunderstanding, which can't really be done from the side of the European Union, because 27 nations have already decided on how they want to live. And cannot just say, okay, so what will you propose that we have to change? This is a very difficult thing. So that's why we have the high criteria for coming closer to the EU or for joining the EU. And that means for those countries who are late in joining the EU, have all these huge demands they have to fulfill. And the politicians in Western Europe have to look also in their nations what they're demanding. And of course, for them, probably topics like jobs, like climate change, like other things are then closer to them than the problems of some other countries. Mm. And therefore, it's a very complex situation, and not only just a misjudgment, but there is a lot more to say for answering this question. But I think what we really now have to reconsider is how we do in the Western, or not in Western Europe, but in the European Union, foreign and defense policy. Mm-hmm.
So from Fukuyama's end of history to Gessen's the future is history, I'm wondering what you mentioned, if like we have already become as we are, in the sense that if we are also actually fulfilling this, because the great strength, and it has been mentioned, is actually this united in diversity, right? So it's that there should be a certain flexibility.
But with we are, I mean, of course, sticking really to European values. Mm. I mean, this is very, very clear. Yeah. You have to strengthen the democratic institution, you have an independent judicial system, you have to free media, you have to respect human rights. So there are really clear measurements, and you need parliaments who really play a role and know their duty. So this is not that much cultural thing. At least I will hope that it's not that much, because we have to be very careful. Yeah. This cultural thing, the question of identity, is a very difficult thing, and we should accept that all our nations are diverse, have their own history, and this applies to Western European countries the same way as to Poland, as to Hungary, but also to the Balkans or to Ukraine, and we have to see this and be careful with this.
Even within Germany?
Within Germany is a special case. This is too much for this evening.
Yeah, thank you. I was just pointing to the screen earlier to ask if there are more questions from Menti, because yes, there are. So, because we will slowly come to the end, so if there is more questions, now is your chance. Yes, we have a question over here. Please again step into the light, introduce yourself, although I know that you are Michael, but maybe the audience doesn't know, and I direct a question to someone on the panel, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Stellwag. I'm working for Office of Konrad Adenauer Foundation, but I'm also a member of the Municipal Council of a small village in Lower Austria, responsible for European affairs. Claudia, you spoke about reconciliation, and that this is the very fundament about when we talk about growing together. And you also mentioned different narratives about history. One example, of course, first thing I ever heard when I talked to a Hungarian colleague is Trianon. The same, of course, and of course on a different level in Ukrainian history, Serbian history. And my question now is to you, but all three of you, is reconciliation realistic when there are still these different historical narratives are going around and people are believing these historical narratives like the others are bad and we are good and something was stolen from us and something was unlawful? Is this then possible to reconcile? Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to start?
Just briefly, I mean, reconciliation also contains knowledge. And of course, history is so bright. There's a joke on Radio Yerevan. I don't know if you know Radio Yerevan. Russians ask Radio Yerevan, where will we be in 5 years? And the answer was, we don't know yet where our past will be in 5 years, how we can know the future. And this shows something, because the past, of course, is used. And therefore, providing the real knowledge, I think also needs the openness to listen and to change the shoes, go in the shoes of the others. And therefore, reconciliation starts with openness, willingness, and then there will also be openness for looking for facts, for understanding facts, even sometimes facts going back in centuries. I mean, the battle on the Kosovo Polje in 1389, I mean, who of us was there, right? I mean, really to know exactly all the facts is difficult, and therefore it goes with each other. We have to know also the facts and the data, but probably we really have to start to invite, especially the young generation, to come together, to be open, to listen. You haven't to be maybe convinced in the first part, but to listen and to understand and try to go on the other side. And of course, this is a starting point.
Thank you. Before we continue, I would like to pick up also this question, because I think it's very interesting, also in the direction for both the countries you are coming from. Is the candidate status of Ukraine and Moldova escalating or de-escalating the situation? I think that also goes for the situation on the Western Balkans and in Serbia.
To be quite honest, I think it doesn't make a difference. It's a strong political statement, absolutely, a strong political statement. But on the ground, I think not much will change, because Ukraine, I cannot speak for Moldova, but I would say that Ukraine at the moment is not in a position to start dealing with various aspects of harmonizing with the European Union. It's just simply not possible. It's focusing on survival. So I think it's highly symbolic, but the practicality of it at the moment, the timeline that just doesn't follow, I think maybe for the Ukrainian people, it is very important. But I think, as I said, I'm just a concerned citizen. I'm not a politician, nor am I a military expert. I'm not sure that the Russians will care one way or the other, or they will use it in their political narrative to explain why it was even more necessary to do what they did because of what's happening. So I don't know. I think it will be manipulated, but it's difficult to, I think it's an extremely tricky question, where I think it's 50-50, and we will only know in the future. But initially, I think the impact will be lesser than is expected by the decision makers. And so maybe I'd like to say that I don't think I've become cynical, but regions that go through war, they lose illusions and accept things maybe differently. So I think there's a certain caution, because one of the things that where there are regions of conflict, there you see so many dehumanizing things, and people, in order to survive, have to suppress many emotions and feelings because simply go crazy because of all the things they are witnessing. So in this respect, I think there's also a problem of perception, that the way also media are presenting what's going on, and how countries that have had the good fortune of not had armed conflict are perceiving what's going on, and what is happening on the ground are two different things. I don't say this is necessarily bad, but simply we can relate to other people's experiences, but sometimes you can't understand. And that is true. You know, if you've been hit by a bus, then you can understand when it happens to somebody else, but you have to survive this first, of course.
Thank you. Ira, what do you think?
I agree with my colleagues, previous speakers in general, and I would like, I wanted only to add, we are not only surviving right now, we are fighting. So that's a truly inspired thing for all of Ukrainians who are on the border, in this military zone territory, occupied territory. It helps them to understand that future are close, and we are supported with our neighbors, European states, who share the same values, rule of law and democracy, and it makes us stronger, and it helps us. So I would assess it only in a positive way.
Thank you so much. We are coming to an end, but we would use Menti one more time for a final question that we will use for a final round, where I have a final question as well. So final question to the audience in the room and in front of the screens first. Has the peace project of the EU been weakened or strengthened by the Russian attack in Ukraine? And you don't have to choose yes or no. You can use the scale and tell us how much you think it has been weakened or strengthened, or it's neither of both. So right now we're seeing that it's moving into the direction that it has been strengthened. It's weakened a little bit, but it's still in the 2/3 column. We would see that I think with all the results coming in, it's not going to shift drastically into strengthened or weakened. I would go for 2/3, which is, I think, quite an optimistic assessment that I, to a certain extent, would share. But I'm curious also, of course, what you think with this regard. So very briefly, maybe do you agree or do you disagree? And then my very last question for this evening to you. Ira, do you want to start?
I will also agree with the idea of strengthening of the European Union with Ukraine. This union with us as a full member will be much stronger. As we previously discussed, the war actually started a long time ago. So maybe some doubts limited our vision of the future. Anyway, union and solidarity will help us to keep peace and to develop in a more sustainable way. And I hope prevent more any similar conflicts in future.
Thank you. Ivanka?
Well, I agree with the poll. Absolutely. I think it has brought to a strengthening, but I think it has primarily brought the realization of how fragile peace is. And I think many of us take it for granted that peace is there, permanent, and something it's gained. It's something that it's not automatically to be accepted that it's given. We're living in very turbulent times where obviously modes of political debate are not only words, but also we're maybe regressing in some respects. So I would believe that this very rough awakening of that war is not something that is in our past, but it's something that we are living, and it cannot be excluded that it can be happening in the future, is that we really need to put all of our efforts toward the peace process and to try to have other modes of conflict resolution rather than war. Because I have to say, excuse me for focusing on regional, but I think the way Europe has fully supported Ukraine this is a really clear-cut situation where it's the good and the bad, or let's say the right and the wrong is very clear. With an invasion, I think it's clear-cut. I think for many, the Balkan conflict was not fully understood, and therefore then you lose a little bit of the understanding, the compassion, and which doesn't make the conflict any less horrible. But maybe something good can come out of this, is that despite all of the suffering that is going on, that this will unite Europe in a way that it will be a triggering event for European unity and solidarity that we have not seen maybe sufficiently in the previous years. So let's be optimistic in this evening.
Thank you, Ivanka. And Claudia?
I really agree what Ivanka just said. And I hope she is right. I mean, strengthening, you could see, just take these measurements and the sanctions against the aggressor. These were on a scale we couldn't imagine few months ago. So this is a strong sign of unity and willingness really to defend the fight, the right side of the Ukraine fight and defend our democratic system. But the real test then would be if we have to come to terms in question of the institution of the European Union to make some change, maybe to improve and these kind of things. So, and I'm looking forward that we really show also the strengths then.
Thank you so much. I mean, my last question has more or less been actually answered by what you have said, because I wanted to come back to this, the narrative of 70 years of peace, which is not true to everyone on the continent, and the different experience that we have seen in this panel, and what institutions can contribute to it. I think you very well answered that already. So I would like to say thank you so much. How fantastic was this panel? A big round of applause to my three panelists. It was such a pleasure to be able to talk to you, and I think it shows when you have the right composition of a panel, you can get through a lot of questions and have a lot of different points brought into it. Please, a round of applause by accompanying them off the stage. Yes, please, this way, thank you so much. It's almost over, but allow me, bear with me for just a few more words. This Danube Salon comes to an end with the notion that we dealt with the topic of the SDG 16. The Sustainable Development Goals are a comprehensive UN approach to eliminate inequalities and securing the future. This also includes the topic of climate protection. And the State of Law Austria aims to connect people, nature, and climate, as well as sees itself as a bridge builder and a reliable partner in a Europe of regions, as we also have heard in the very beginning. And this can be seen through the activities also of the working community of the Danube regions, the AG Donauländer, which always strives to promote and strengthen mutual understanding and positive development in the Danube region and in Europe. And with this, Climate and Me is an international touring exhibition which offers a colorful setting for today's event. It's unfortunately no longer in the foyer, but it was created as a cooperation project between the Lower Austrian Museum, the state's Energy and Environment Agency, and the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. So even if you join us online or if you are here in the room, you will maybe have the possibility to see that exhibition because it will be on tour throughout Europe in German and English for a long period of time, starting in July 2022 and ending in June 2025. I can only tell you that it's worth trying to figure out and trying to see it because it's offering really a positive food for thought, and I had the impression that it's not the usual pointing the finger approach when it comes to questions on climate change. Then I would like to also note that this Danube Salon is scientifically accompanied by the University for Continuing Education, the Danube University Krems, and that the results of this will lead to a declaration by the AG Donauländer, and the recording of this discussion will be, amongst others, available on the YouTube channel of IDM Vienna, and you can find more information about the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe at www.idm.at, amongst others, about the final conference of our Jean Monnet project that we implement together with the Danube Rectors Conference, which is called From Fictional to Functioning Democracy, and will be held in Vienna on the 13th of July. And allow me some little bit of shameless self-promotion, because today we published a policy paper which is called The Day After, and with this, together with my wonderful colleague, Professor Ulrich Schneckener from the University of Osnabrück, we advocate a greater European Council as a reaction of the granting of the candidate status for Moldova and Ukraine. It was such a pleasure to moderate this event again. I would like to thank all the people working hard in the back, in my ear, to make this successful, even if I go off script from time to time. Sorry for that. Thank you very much. And representative for this, yes. Representative for this, I would like to thank Teresa Stummer and Daniela Apaydin, who have supported me throughout this process very much. Thank you to all of you for making this happen. Thank you. And now, really, last but not least, to come back to the topic of this salon, get home safely. But before you do that, join us at the film bar for an informal exchange. Thank you very much. My name is Sebastian Schäffer. Take care. Thank you.